What is going on, sports fans? Thank you guys so much for tuning in to yet another episode of Fantasy Haus Live. Now, we got another exciting and jam-packed kind of episode for you. So, in addition to the usual weekly review and the power rankings, since it is the start of the playoffs, our previews are going to be just a hair different. So, the top, I believe, like 4 teams, top 4 teams, I think are in the winners bracket. No, top 6 teams are in the winners bracket. And then bottom 4 teams are in the consolation bracket. So I will have both those brackets to show you once we get to the preview section at kind of towards, not really towards the end of the video, but like 3/4 of the way through the video, I'll say. But as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Welcome on in. And let's get right into the action. As always, we are going to start with our review of the last week of the regular season. And it was quite a big week. So, starting with our top dogs, like we would start anywhere else, we have Team Nugent getting the big win over the Cheetah Hill by a score of 132-98. Then in our next matchup, we had Destino getting a huge win over CD's Nuts by a score of 140-84. Then in our third matchup, it's Bob's Burgers continuing to gain momentum while we get towards the playoffs. Well, while we make our way into the playoffs here, with winning by a score of 129-89. Then in our fourth matchup, the BJJs pull off the upset against Champ Cheese to disrupt some of that momentum they had going into the playoffs. But losing to the BJJs by a score 101-97. And in our last game of the week, Team Breaky was able to get the win over the Lame Tanks by a score of 93-70. We're going to start off with our pretty much our game of the week, which was Team Nuge taking on the Cheetah Hill. Okay, starting at the top, which saw for Team Nuge, saw with our quarterbacks Trevor Lawrence dropping an impressive 37 points in the win over Tennessee, while Dak Prescott was only able to get 16 points, while Houston kind of had their way with Dallas for the first good portion of that game. Then in our battle of the running backs, we had Christian McCaffrey back for Team Nugent here, dropping almost 30 points in the huge blowout win over Tampa with the rookie quarterback and Brock Purdy, no less. Then we switch over to Mr. Austin Eckler, aka the Muscle Hamster, for the Chargers, able to get 24 points in that win over Miami. Moving into the next matchup of running backs, we have Tony Pollard dropping 22 points in, once again, that come from behind victory over Houston, while for the Cheetah Hill, Travis Etienne did not have a good day, despite the Jaguars getting the win over Tennessee, only able to get 3 points. While if we move into the first set of wide receivers, for Nuge here, we have CeeDee Lamb only able to get 3 points in that come from behind win over Houston, while Ty Freak able to get 24 points in the big win over the Chargers, including that impressive scoop and score off the fumble, which pretty much, if you guys didn't see it, the lineman supposedly either he unintentionally shoved it to the side, or if he did know and shove it to the side where just the fastest player in the league happened to be standing. That's incredible. Either way, took it for a touchdown, but able to get 24 points as he's continuing to have a miraculous season. Moving on to T. Higgins for Nuge, who's unfortunately dropping no points. Did T. Higgins get injured, or did he just put up a stink? It looks like he almost put up day-to-day, just one offensive snap. Yeah, okay, so wait, what? That he aggravated during pregame warmups. Oh, interesting. So he must have played one snap. That's sad. Okay. Well, you always hate it when one of your guys puts up obviously a goose egg, but if there was a team for this to happen to, Nuge was the one, because I think he has the best record in the league. and so this, even with that, it's didn't really affect him too much. Then for the Cheetah Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the wide receiver #1 sensation for Detroit, able to get 13 points in the win over Minnesota. I don't think anyone had Detroit beating Minnesota. Then in the tight ends, we have Mark Andrews for Nuge, only able to get 3 points in the 16-14 win over Pittsburgh. That's the backup quarterback even get hurt, Tyler Huntley. I know that because I had him in another league, Sag, but hopefully he's okay. Then we look over for the Cheetah Hill and Noah Fant, who also put up a goose egg in the loss to Carolina, which I don't think anyone saw happening to Seattle. Then if we flip on into the flex position, we have AJ Brown for Nuge, continuing to have a very impressive season, dropping 17 points in the blowout win over the Giants. Then for the Cheetah Hill, Jalen Waddle, only able to get 5 points in the loss to the Chargers. Oh, did I say that Tyreek and the Miami won against the Chargers? That was my bad. I meant they lost. Then next we're going to flip into the defenses, where Dallas was able to get 4 points for Nuge in the win for over Houston, while for the Cheetah Hill, he really went triple deep on the Dolphins here. Well, I don't blame him. The Dolphins are actually a decent team this year, especially with Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen. The defense is mediocre, kind of been up and down, only able to get 1 point in the loss to the Chargers. While then lastly, we move into the matchup of the kickers, which is Nick Folk for Nuge, able to get 11 points, while over in the win in Arizona, which saw Kyler Murray get a season-ending knee injury. Then lastly, Brett Maher able to get 11 points in the win over Houston. Okie dokie, and that finished the first matchup that we had. So we'll move into matchup number 2, which saw Destino getting a huge win over CD's Nuts. And how did that matchup break down, you may ask? Well, this is how it broke down. So, starting off, Patrick Mahomes had 23 points in the win over Denver, while for CD, Tua had 14 points despite losing to the Chargers. Next up are the running backs. So first up for Destino is Nick Chubb, who only was able to get 8 points in the loss to Cincinnati, while Dameon Pierce, I say it every week, the rookie sensation for Houston, able to get 11 points. So continuing a pretty modest day. I actually think he had a touchdown, which pretty much salvaged the day for him in the loss to Dallas. Then in the next set of running backs, we have Samaj P. Ryan, who also salvaged his day with a touchdown, only able to get about 9.4 points in the win over Cleveland. Then for CD, we have Ramondre Stevenson, able to get 3 points in the win over Arizona. I think he went out with an injury, which is why he was only able to get 3 points. Then in the next first set of wide receivers, for Destino, Adam Thielen went off for 19 points, even though I remember from when I did the preview last week, I said that Thielen was kind of hard to spot. I actually can't remember. Thielen went off for 19.5 points in the loss to Detroit, while for CD, Mike Evans was able to get 8 points in the blowout loss to San Francisco. Moving right along into the next set of wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy for Destino had a very, very good day despite Russell Wilson going down with injury, getting 33 points in the loss to Kansas City. While across the way for CD here, DeAndre Hopkins able to get 12 points, even with Kyler Murray going down with injury. So showing that he can produce no matter who's at quarterback, but we've seen that before from him. Then if we move into the tight ends, Travis Kelce obviously continuing to produce, being easily the best tight end in the league. He's been the best tight end in the league for quite some time now. Able to get 11 able to get 11 points in the win over Denver. While for CD, Tyler Conklin was able to get 7 points in the loss to Buffalo. Moving into the flex spot, Brandon Ayuk able to get 13 points in that big win over Tampa. While for CD, Joe Mixon was able to get 12 points, making his return to the roster in that win over Cleveland. While we move into the battle of the defenses, first up for Destino, the Ravens able to get 11 points in the win over Pittsburgh. While for CD, the Eagles able to get only 9 points despite blowing out the Giants 48-22. Then we move into the final matchup of the kickers. For starting with Destino, we have Harrison Butker here adding 11 points in the win over Denver, while for CD, Evan McPherson only able to get 5 in the win over Cleveland. Moving right along into our third matchup, which saw Bob's Burgers continue to pick up momentum against the Chicago Deviants. Starting as always at the top, Lamar Jackson, who did not play. So that's just very unfortunate, just some misjudgment there in not subbing him out in time. Some netting him 0 points, so clearly not helping. And then for Bob's Burgers, Jared Goff able to get 29 points. So actually having himself a nice little second half to the season there in the win over Minnesota. Next up in the first set of running backs, we have Leonard Fournette able to get 10 points in the loss to San Francisco. While for Bob's Burgers here, Najee Harris able to get 13 points in the loss to Baltimore. Then into the RB2 situation, we have Miles Sanders able to get 28 points in a huge day for him in that blowout win over the Giants, while Jamal Williams starting to become more of a rotational guy now. It seems like they're a running back by committee there with DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, and Justin Jackson all there in Detroit. So he was only able to get 3.7 despite the pretty much insane pace he was on this year. Moving into the first set of wide receivers, Robert Woods for the Deviants able to get 9 points in the loss to Jacksonville, while Keenan Allen continues to produce while healthy and in the lineup. Able to get 21 points in the win over Miami. In the wide receiver 2 matchup, we have George Pickens for the Deviants able to get 10 points in the loss to Baltimore, while for Bob's Burgers, it was Christian Kirk who was also able to muster up a pretty modest 9 points in the win over Tennessee. Then in the battle of the tight ends, we have Hunter Henry for the Deviants putting up a 10 points in the win over Arizona, while TJ Hawkinson continuing to produce, able to get 11 points despite losing to Detroit against his old team. Then in the flex matchup, we have Michael Gallup for the Deviants, able to get 6 points in the come from behind victory over Houston, while for Bob's Burgers, DJ Chark was able to get 21 points for the Lions in that win over Minnesota. In the matchup of the defenses, the Rams able to only get 5 points in the 1-point win over Las Vegas, while the 49ers able to get 9 points in the big win over Tampa. Then in the final showdown, we have Tyler Bass for Buffalo able to get 9 points in the win over the Jets, while Justin Tucker for Baltimore was able to get 11 points for Bob's Burgers. Then in our next matchup, it saw the BJJs getting a narrow upset victory over the Champ Cheese, who were looking good and looking to continue building steam going into the playoffs. So breaking it down, at the top, we see right where problem number 1 is. As soon as I read this name here, Kyler Murray went down with injury, non-contact injury. We found out today that it is actually indeed a torn ACL, which is mad unfortunate. Obviously it's season ending, so that means Colt McCoy is going to be the backup. Just devastating. Also considering I have Tyler Huntley. So yeah, it was a rough week for me for my quarterbacks. So we're going to have to go looking. Now, switching to the BJJs, who had Deshaun Watson, who was able to get 19 points in his second game back from suspension. In the first set of running backs, we had Delvin Cook, who definitely underachieved as the Vikings fell to the Lions. Then for the BJJs, King Henry went off for 20 points in the loss to Jacksonville. Switching back to Champ Cheese for the next running back here, we have Saquon Barkley. Another underperforming week as the Giants got blown out by Philadelphia this week. Only able to get 6 points. While Raheem Mostert, who took over for the injured Jeff Wilson in that Miami and Chargers game, only able to get 5 points. Then in the matchup of first wide receivers for these teams, we have Justin Jefferson able to get 33 points despite losing to Detroit, so that was obviously a huge help, while Mike Williams pretty much just answered back and had himself a day for the Chargers, able to get 23 points in that win over Miami. And then we're going to flip it back to Champ Cheese in the next set of wide receivers, where Devontae Smith, who had himself a pretty productive day. I know he's been pretty inconsistent this season. Some days he's had like maybe a couple catches and maybe like 4 or 5 points, and then other days where he just explodes. This happened to be a pretty modest one, getting 17 points in that win over the Giants. While Devontae Parker, I believe he was also knocked out of the game, only able to get 4 points before he went out with injury. In the battle of the tight ends, Dalton Schultz continuing to, again, I say this every time, he continues to produce while Dak is on the field, able to get 14 points in that comeback win over Houston. Then Gerald Everett for the BJJs, only able to get 7 points in that win over Miami. We're going to move into the flex positions here, which Dante Foreman only able to get 8 points in the win over Seattle, while Latavius Murray able to get 6 points in the loss to Kansas City. Then we move into the defenses, where the Seahawks for Champ Cheese only able to get 1 point in that losing effort to Carolina, while for the BJJs, the Broncos able to get 4 points in that loss to Kansas City. And then finally, we have the kickers. Starting off for Champ Cheese, Jason Myers in Seattle. In that losing effort, he was able to get 6 points though, so not too bad, actually pretty good. While Cameron Dicker had himself a day for Miami, or for the Chargers, able to get 11 points in that win over Miami. All right, and in our final matchup of the week, it saw Team Breaky picking up another win as we get out of the regular season here. And not only was it a big win in the last week of the season for him. And we'll see why in a bit. But we're going to break it down like we always do. As always, starting with the QBs. So, for Team Breaky, Jalen Hurts had himself a day, able to get 32 points in the blowout win over the Giants. While Josh Allen only able to get 22 points. I say only able to get 22 points in the win over the Jets. Rolling on into the first set of running backs, Cam Akers, who everyone pretty much just forgot was on the Rams. And then they started. Let's see, there was injuries, and then Darrell Henderson, I just believe they released. So pretty much by war of attrition, Cam Akers is back, able to get 9.3 points. DeAndre Swift able to get 6.9 points in the win over Minnesota. Like I said, kind of going at that team with the running back by committee, because I know they did use Justin Jackson in that Detroit and Minnesota game as well. So all three of those backs were seeing action. In the next set of running backs, despite even having someone on bye playing, which I guess technically, oh, never mind. Well, I guess it evened out because so did the Lame Tanks on the other side. They had the Packers who were on bye, which is why Aaron Jones was on bye. So that put up a stink egg. But even in a very skill position like that, that's insane that he was able to win. Then across from Aaron Jones for Lame Tanks was Devin Singletary, able to get 5 points in the win over the Jets. Then in the battle of wide receivers, we have Stephon Diggs able to get 6 points in the win over the Jets, while the Lame Tanks were also able to get 6 points in the loss to Cincinnati. Then in the next set of wide receivers, Devontae Adams was able to get 10 points in the loss to the Rams, while Tyler Lockett for Lame Tanks was able to get 17 points in the loss to Carolina. Moving into the tight ends, Pat Freiermuth for Team Breaky was able to get 12 points in the loss to Baltimore, while Mr. George what am I talking about? George Kittle was able to get 6 points in the win over Tampa. Then moving into the flex spot, Allen Robinson, I think, is actually done for the season, threw up a donut. So we had 2 players throw up donuts and still won. That's crazy. Then for Lame Tanks, Tyler Boyd threw up a donut, I believe. Was he in? Or did he just not get targeted? That is actually a really good question. Let's take a quick little look here. The finger injury held Boyd to just 2 snaps. Oh, okay, so that explains that. Then we roll into the defenses, starting with Mr. Team Breaky here, able to get 11 points with Buffalo's win over the Jets, while the Packers did not play at all, so not helping Lame Tanks there. Then in the last matchup, we saw Daniel Carlson able to get 12 points for the Team Breaky, while losing to the Rams. On the opposite side, we had Matt Gay for the Rams, only able to get 6 points in the win over Las Vegas. So our next segment here is going to be the power rankings and kind of how everything shook out from last week to this week, going into the final, or I should say, coming off the heels of the final game of the regular season and going into the playoffs. Amongst our top dogs, there was no movement at all. As you can see, Team Nuge remaining at number 1 with the best record in the league at 10-4. Then the Cheetah Hill coming in at 9-2, and Destino coming in at 9-3, or coming in at top dog number 3. Both those teams, the Cheetah Hill and Destino, have 9-5 records. Then moving into the middle of the pack, we have Bob's Burgers, who was actually up from last week up to the 4th spot, rocking an 8-6 record. Then falling down 1 spot is Champ Cheese, who is at 500 with 7-7 on the season. In 6th place and holding it down is CD's Nuts, with a 6-8 record. In 7th spot, also not moving anywhere, is the Chicago Deviants with a 6-8 record. Then out of nowhere, everyone thought this man was dead. Team Breaky jumping from last place to 8th place, getting out of the dumpster fires with a 5-9 record. Starting of our first of 2 dumpster fires, the BJJs holding that 9 spot with 5-9, while the Lame Tanks, on the heels of the loss on the last game of the season, falling to that 10th spot, making them 5-9 on the season. Like I kind of mentioned towards the beginning of the video, it is actually playoff times, or I should say playoff time is here for us. The first round is finally here, so we have 2 sets of brackets that we're going to show you. First is going to be the winner's bracket, and then the next is going to be the consolation bracket, which will probably just break down into our loser's bracket. I'm trying to figure out how ESPN does it, because we actually upped the amount of players that are in our league from 8 to 10 this year. So it'll be interesting to see how it breaks down. But this is how the winner's bracket is looking for round 1. So, in our first matchup, I guess you could call this our wild card round, if you will, the 7-7 Champ Cheese is taking on the 8-6 Bob Burgers, while the winner of that matchup will then take on the best in the league, Team Nuge, sitting at 10-4 in the next round. Then on the opposite side, Destino, sitting at 9-5 on the season, will take on CD's Nuts at 6-8, with the winner of that match taking on the Cheetah Hill, the second place man himself, who is sitting at 9-5. And we'll take a look at our consolation bracket. And in those two matches, so there's two matchups, which I believe will decide the, I guess, 9th, 10th, and then 8th and 7th spots, respectively, out of however this works. So you have the 5-9 Team Breaky taking on the 6-8 Chicago Deviants in a battle of the brothers. Then, in the last matchup, we have the Lame Tanks taking on the BJJs, both of them sitting at 5-9. I guess we could technically call this the Dumpster Fire Bowl number 1 or part 1. But that is where we're starting. But that is not where we're going to end it. We are actually going to take, as per usual, a little bit of a deeper dive into each of these matchups. So we're going to switch gears here and go into our first. We're going to go back to the winner's bracket and take a look at how some of these, we'll potentially break down. We'll take some picks and see what happens. So in our first matchup, it is Champ Cheese taking on Bob's Burgers. So first off, we see Kyler Murray, who's out right now. Champ Cheese is me, so I can tell you right now that there are waiver requests out, and he will not be the quarterback come this weekend. Then, across the way, we have Jared Goff in Detroit taking on the Jets. Oof. Well, obviously, you got to take this matchup at what it is. So you have to roll Jared Goff because there are no other quarterbacks. There's Tyler Huntley, but I think it's pretty certain that he is not going to play with whatever injury. It looks like he got pretty much bent in half in that game. So whatever injury he's dealing with there. Then in the first set of matchup for running backs, we have Delvin Cook and Minnesota going against Indy versus Najee Harris and Pittsburgh going against Carolina. So both these are good running backs with going against teams. Well, Carolina's coming off a win against the Rams. No, against Seattle. While Minnesota's coming off a surprise loss to Detroit. Indianapolis, though, is not quite as good as a defense. I'm going to go ahead and say Delvin on this one, just for that exact reason that I stated. Indy is not that great of a defense. They prove, while I think they're just worse than Carolina, since Carolina at least just shut down Seattle's pretty much their running attack and their passing attack. Then in the next set of running backs, we have Saquon Barkley and the Giants taking on Washington in a divisional rematch, which saw a tie in their first matchup. Then across the way, we have Jamal Williams in Detroit taking on the Jets. Well, I think we're going to have to roll Saquon in this one just because in the last few weeks, Jamal Williams and the Detroit Lions have been doing a more running back by committee sort of approach, which unfortunately has then seen all of those backs kind of have more of a limited target share, which is just kind of how that works, unfortunately. Moving into the first matchup of wide receivers, we have Justin Jefferson and Minnesota going against Indy versus Keenan Allen and the Chargers going against Tennessee. Got to go with Justin Jefferson. The Indianapolis Colts defense is, I would say, a little bit worse than the Tennessee Titans, while the Tennessee Titans actually have the next kind of easiest schedule, I believe, after this game. So we shall see, but I think Justin Jefferson is going to have the better day. Moving into the first set of wide receivers, or second set of wide receivers, we have Devontae Smith for Champ Cheese in Philly going against Chicago versus Christian Kirk in Jacksonville going against Dallas. Dallas is a very good defense this year. Although Jacksonville has definitely stepped it up, I think that just ever so slightly Devontae Smith might I think Devontae Smith is going to have a better day because that Chicago defense is not as good as Dallas's is. Moving into the tight ends, we have Dalton Schultz in Dallas going against Jacksonville versus TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota going against Indy. Got to go with Hawkinson on this one. A very good tight end on a very good tight end on a very good team that's looking to hopefully bounce back from a loss to Detroit against a not that great Indianapolis team. A loss to the Vikings here against Indianapolis would, at least in my mind, would be some sort of a red flag because they've been one of the best teams in the NFC all season. So it would be another shocker on back-to-back weeks if that happened. Then in the flex spot, we have David Montgomery in Chicago going against Philly versus DJ Chark in Detroit going against the Jets. Oof. This is not an ideal matchup for either. That defensive front for Philly is actually very tough. I don't think. And not only that, David Montgomery, even though he is the number one back there with Khalil or Herbert being on IR, Justin Fields has pretty much been running the ball and is actually, I think, one of the top leading rushers in the league, ironically enough. So I'm actually going to give this one to DJ Chark, who's going against the Jets. I think there's just a chance with these new look Detroit Lions that he might be able to break through. It's almost kind of the same deal with Amon-Ra. It's like he'll be good, but it's kind of tough because the Jets are actually a pretty tough defense this year. Then moving into the defenses, we have the Seahawks taking on San Francisco, which is a tough draw when we have the Niners taking on the Seahawks. Oof. So we have two opposing defenses taking on each other here. I'm gonna have to say the Niners. They've just been playing pretty lights out. And Seattle just got beat by Carolina, who had, I believe, Sam Darnold at quarterback. Then moving into the kickers, we have Jason Myers in Seattle once again going against San Fran versus Justin Tucker in Baltimore going against Cleveland. Gotta roll with the GOAT in Justin Tucker to get more points in this one, 100%. With the state of Baltimore's offense right now, even if they do drive the field down a bit, Tucker's got a hell of a leg. He's easily the best kicker in the league right now, or at least one of them, and can still put points on the boards even though they'd be out from distance. In our next matchup, it would see Destino taking on CD's Nuts. But how? How would these break down, you may ask? Well, like these. Starting off at the top, we have a battle of two very good quarterbacks here. Tua Tagovailoa in Miami taking on Buffalo versus Patrick Mahomes and KC taking on Houston. Oh, that juicy matchup for Houston. Gotta roll with Mahomes in this one. Then you go on the running backs. You have Joe Mixon and Cincy taking on Tampa versus Nick Chubb and Cleveland taking on Baltimore. Ooh. This might be close, but I like, with the state that Baltimore's defense is in, I guess the same could technically be said for Tampa Bay, but I think Nick Chubb will have the better day here. In the battle of RB2s, we have James Conner in Arizona taking on Denver versus Samaje Perine and Cincy taking on Tampa. Well, Joe Mixon's back, so I would expect that to definitely cut into Perine a bit here, even though he did score last week, so there is that. But I still think James Conner's going to have the better day, especially with Kyler Murray going down. Then, in the first set of wide receivers, we have DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona taking on Denver versus Adam Thielen in Minnesota taking on Indy. Ooh, this is a tough matchup. Colt McCoy was under center once Kyler Murray went down. DeAndre Hopkins was only able to get about 12 points in that when Colt came in. So I'm going to have to roll with Thielen on this one. Once again, that matchup against Indy is just too appetizing. Moving into the next set of wide receivers, we have Garrett Wilson and the Jets taking on Detroit versus Jerry Jeudy and Denver taking on Arizona. Ooh. If Russell Wilson can play, maybe Jerry Jeudy on this one. But if he can't and he has that concussion or he's ruled out because of a concussion, then you got to go Garrett Wilson. You wonder if Jeff Okdua is going to be covering him. From the Detroit side, he's probably one of their best corners, if not the best corner that they have. So if that happens, Garrett Wilson could potentially get put on an island, or he could just burn him. So we'll have to see. That'll be a matchup to keep an eye on. Moving into the next of the tight ends, we have Tyler Conklin, the Jets, going against Detroit versus Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs going against Houston. Without a doubt, Kelce on this one. Can't go against the best in the league. Moving just right on into the flex position, we have Zay Jones in Jacksonville taking on Dallas versus Brandon Ayuk, and San Fran taking on Seattle. Ooh. I think I'm going to roll with Ayuk on this one just because Dallas has a good defense. Although I do expect him to have a slight impact on the game, I just don't think he's going to be putting up more numbers than Ayuk against a Seattle team that was just beaten once again by Sam Darnold of all QBs. Then in the defense, battle of the defenses, we have the Eagles and Philly taking on Chicago versus the Ravens of Baltimore taking on Cleveland. Got to go with the Eagles. They are a very good team this year, very good defense, very good offense. So you got to go against them take them when they go against Chicago, who seems to be a little bit injury riddled, but also still trying to, stay competitive. Then in the final matchup final showdown, we have Evan McPherson and Cincy taking on Tampa versus Butker, and KC taking on Houston. Ooh, I could see probably McPherson maybe actually having the better day, because if that Cincy and Tampa game goes to a shootout, or perhaps even they just stall out drives, that's good for him. I think for KC, that's too high-powered of an offense going against too bad of a defense, and I think that it just might be a lot of extra points for Harrison Butker and not like long-distance field goals, but I could be wrong. Okay, now shifting gears into our losers bracket matches. First up, we have the Battle of the Brothers, in which we have Team Breaky taking on the Chicago Deviants. So starting at the top, Jalen Hurts and Philly taking on Chicago versus Lamar and Baltimore. I don't even think Lamar is playing, so you got to go Jalen because it's just obviously the de facto one to go to. And then we have Cam Akers and the Rams taking on Green Bay versus Leonard Fournette, and Tampa taking on Cincy. I think Leonard Fournette's going to have the better day, seeing as Fournette is the number one back there. And Cam Akers, I'm still there. It's just on an atrocious Rams team. In our next matchup of running backs, we have Aaron Jones in Green Bay taking on the Rams versus Miles Sanders in Philly going against Chicago. Miles Sanders coming off a huge game. I might have to roll with Aaron Jones on this one. Like I said, that Rams team is not that great, but we'll see. Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon have been kind of doing their thing, so we'll see. But I would expect Miles Sanders to have a very good day against that Chicago team. Then in the wide receiver 1 matchup, we have Stephon Diggs in Buffalo taking on Miami versus Robert Woods in Tennessee taking on the Chargers. Gonna have to roll with Stephon Diggs because he is the number one there. Back into the action in our next matchup of wide receivers, Devontae Adams and the Raiders taking on New England versus George Pickens and Pittsburgh taking on Carolina. Ooh, this will be a tough matchup. I think, you know what? I think I'm going to go with George Pickens. I think George Pickens might edge out Tay here. I just think that that New England defense is probably going to just stifle the Raiders. I'm 100% prepared to eat my words in that one. It's Tay we're talking about here, and I love Tay. In the next set, well, I guess I should say in the matchup of the tight ends, we have Pat Freiermuth And the Pittsburgh Titans Pittsburgh Titans, and the Pittsburgh Steelers going against the Carolina, while Hunter Henry and New England take on Las Vegas. Based on the matchup, I would go with Freiermuth on this one, assuming he's good to go. In the flex matchup, we have Allen Robinson, who's on IR, so you should probably switch him out. So we're just going to roll straight up with Gallup, who at least will be playing. Then in the battle of the defenses, we have the Bills in a tough matchup against Miami, while the Rams also have a tough matchup in Green Bay. I think the Bills are going to... I think the Bills will put up just a tiny bit more points, while I think the Rams... while I don't think they'll necessarily be like negative points, I think they'll only put up maybe like a few. I don't expect it to be a blowout, but I expect them to like just not let us score a ton. Then in the the kickers, we have Daniel Carlson and Las Vegas taking on New England versus Tyler Bass and Buffalo taking on Miami. My guess here would be that Daniel Carlson, since that offense for the Raiders is a little bit worse, that he'll have a little bit more opportunities to try and put some points on the board. And lastly, in our, consolation bracket round 1, we have the Lame Tanks taking on the JJs. We will show you how this breaks down as well as make our picks. Starting at the top with our QBs, we have Josh Allen in Buffalo taking on Miami versus Kirko. And the Vikings taking on Indy. Ooh, this is going to be a tough matchup. I mean, we know Josh Allen's going to produce, but I'm going to gamble and say Kirk Cousins is going to have the better day. Taking on that terrible Indianapolis defense. Also coming off of the heels of a pretty much I shouldn't say blowout, but a slapping by Detroit. Then in the first set of running backs, we have DeAndre Swift taking on the Lions taking on the Jets versus Derrick Henry in Tennessee taking on the Chargers. Gotta roll Derrick Henry here. He at least gets fed the ball. He is the reigning and defending rushing champ. DeAndre Swift, who everyone thought was the number one back coming in the league, then he got injured, is now kind of more of a running back by committee position. Then in the running back 2 position, we have Devin Singletary for Buffalo taking on Miami versus Alvin Kamara, New England and New Orleans taking on Atlanta. Kamara's been pretty much invisible a lot of New Orleans. I mean, I know there's been injuries, but a lot of their star players have been pretty much abysmal. Kamara being one of them. But that Miami team that Buffalo's got to go against is going to be pretty tough. So I'm going to roll with Alvin Kamara on this one. In the first set of wide receivers, we have Amari Cooper in Cleveland taking on Baltimore versus Michael Pittman Jr. in Indy taking on Minnesota. I'm going to roll with Amari Cooper on this one. He's been having a very good year in Cleveland. Then in the wide receiver 2 matchup, we have Tyler Lockett in Seattle taking on San Francisco versus Mike Williams and the Chargers taking on Tennessee. I'll take Mike Williams in this matchup. He killed it last week. I would expect the same, not the same stat line, but a similar stat line going against a mediocre defense in the Tennessee Titans. And while we're going to move straight into the flex spot, we see Tyler Boyd, who's currently questionable, but we'll consider him playing. And Cincy taking on Tampa versus Brian Robinson. And the Commanders taking on the Giants. I think Brian Robinson is going to play a major role in their game there. Same thing with Scary Terry. Then in the defenses, we have the Packers taking on the Rams versus the Broncos taking on Arizona. I think the Packers defense will have... actually, you know what? I take that back. They got to go against Baker Mayfield. I'm going to switch mine. I think the Broncos are going to put up more points against taking on that Arizona team led by Colt McCoy. And then finally, we have Matt Gay and the Rams taking on Green Bay versus Cameron Dicker and the Chargers taking on Tennessee. I think Matt Gay might have the better day here with more chances with Baker under center to try and put up some points. That will just about do it. Like you saw it, We went over the week, was it 14 review. We then went over the updated power rankings and saw the shifting in the final week of the regular season right as we go into the playoffs here. Then we went into what those playoff brackets look like, starting off with the winners bracket and broke down all those games. We told you who have the buys, which is our number 1 and 2 overall top dogs in both Team Nuge and the Cheetah Hill. And then we broke down all of those games, made our picks through both the winners and consolation brackets. I want to thank you guys for hanging out and tuning in. Thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to hit that like button. You can also comment below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay safe. Much love as always. Bye.